and welcome to another, we can say, holiday edition of This Day in Black Baseball History. This is the second broadcast for 2026, and of course, today is January the 2nd, 2026, and so coming to you live, and hey, I'm just excited to talk about a little baseball this evening. Of course, it won't be long before we'll be getting ready for spring training. So I hope everyone's getting excited for that and start following your team. And just say it's going to be great this year, another great baseball season. And I'm always excited when baseball can get started. But I'm excited tonight because I can talk to you guys. And so we're going to wait probably about maybe 15 more seconds because I have a lot of information I want to bring to you tonight and some special things that I want to talk about. So if you get a chance, let me know if you're listening, where you're listening from. And if you want to subscribe, hey, I won't say no. We're trying to build this network, and I've been on probably since August. I want to say it was August, maybe it could have been late July. So I don't even know if I've reached a half a year yet, but it's coming along real well. I'm getting comfortable and talking in this format. I do lots of presentations, but not typically in this format. So, okay, so I'm going to try to keep my broadcast under 20 minutes. So I'm going to get right in here and get busy, all right? So let's go with the historic fact for January the 2nd. We're going to go back to 1914. And Theodore Reginald Strong Jr. is born in South Bend, Indiana. Of course, you know that's the home of Notre Dame University. I spoke there at the Natatorium, and that was a place that opened in 1922. And of course, for the first 14 years of this public indoor pool, they would not let African Americans swim there. And then finally, they broke down the color barrier, and African Americans, I think they could go there once a month to swim. So couldn't let you swim with the white kids. No, you couldn't do that. So that was in South Bend, Indiana. A lot of people think a lot of racism was just in the South, but you better think again, because I come from a city, Kansas City, and of course, you know, Topeka versus the Board of Education, that's right in Kansas. So, and Kansas was a free state during the, right before the Civil War and through the Civil War. But yeah, there was a lot of prejudice up north as well as the South. The South gets most of the dirty deeds for it, but believe me, the North had their share. And this is just one example. And so anyway, he was born in South Bend, Indiana, and his nickname was Jeep. And I don't know the true origin of that, but I knew it had something to do with the character that was on Popeye. And Popeye was pretty big in the movies in the 40s. And they had a character named Jeep. Maybe somebody knows about that if you grew up watching Popeye. Thank you from the Twin Cities, all right? I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And so let me see if I can get through this Ted Strong here. And of course, Ted was a 6'3" shortstop when he came first into the Negro Leagues in 1937. But he was also a multi-sport athlete because he played basketball as well. With the Harlem Globetrotters, and so baseball with the Kansas City Monarchs and basketball with the Harlem Globetrotters. Now he came and played a few games with the Kansas City Monarchs in 1938, but he was not officially property of the team. He was still in the Indianapolis, belonged to Indianapolis, who were in the league at that particular time, the ABCs. And so in 1939, the Monarchs traded Chili Mayweather to acquire Ted Strong for their team permanently, and that was in 1939. Of course, I did find a quote here. Somebody said, this was a report, he said, in 1940, of course, Ted Strong helped the Globetrotters to a string of 67 wins in 68 games, and one writer characterized him as a Pepper Martin, a Jimmy Fox, and Joe Louis rode into one man. That's quite a man right there. And of course, during the war, he played basketball in the Navy with the Seabees, and they played in Honolulu, Hawaii. So that's Ted Strong, born on this day in January the 2nd, 1914. Now I used to always try to give you some interesting commentary related to some of these athletes. So I didn't realize I didn't have my light on. So let me turn this light on here. There we go. All right, that brightens everything up. So I usually try to give you some interesting commentary. 19, I think it was 46, the Kansas City Monarchs were in the World Series against the Newark Eagles. And all of a sudden, Ted Strong, which was one of their key guys, he didn't show up. And he said that some gamblers were trying to pay him off. And he did not show up, and the Monarchs ended up losing the World Series. And I think also there were some cases where Willie Brown didn't show up. It was somebody else like that as well. And so years passed, and a lot of the guys would not talk about it. I remember Buck O'Neill telling me, well, they had a contract down in Puerto Rico, so they were signing up for that and just skipped the World Series. And of course, if you look in the annals of Black baseball, you'll see that they say Newark won the World Series, but they don't tell you that two key players aren't there. And one of those key players was Ted Strong. I remember talking to Othello Renfro, and Othello Renfro not being happy with that all those years later. And he said they never truly knew the answer. And I think Renfro never forgave them for that. And they went on to lose, once again, the World Series to Newark. And so historically, the Kansas City Monarchs were in the World Series, but they did not win because they did not have Ted Strong. Now, these are stories that I got from players. And when I would know something about history, I would ask a player. I remember one time I was talking to Chet Brewer, and I saw that he had a fight with one of the guys from the American and National League in a Winter League game. So, hey, I just called Chet on the phone and said, hey, Chet, why were you fighting this guy? What started that fight? And Chet went on to tell me this guy started calling him names. Now, none of this was in the article. They just said that it was a fight. But since I had these guys on direct dial, I could call them, and Chet Brewer gave me information. But this is the case with Ted Strong. So I want to just mention that, all right? So we're going to go to the second fact, and let's see. The second fact occurred January the 2nd, 1938. After taking a 17-2 lead in the first quarter, the Harlem Globetrotters, behind Zach Clayton's 17 points, smothered the local AOWLS team in a 54-31 final at Lewiston, Idaho. They say they're all over the country, right? So in the summer months, in case you don't know anything about Zach Clayton, he played baseball and played for the Kansas City, not the Kansas City, but the Chicago American Giants. Also played for Bismarck, the Bismarck Giants of Atlantic City. So he was quite the baseball player as well as a basketball player. But he was also a boxing referee, which means that he probably boxed at some point, either amateur or professional. I'm going to dig a little deeper to find that out. But Clayton is the one who, let's see, 1974, he was the referee of that famous bout. You remember the Rumble in the Jungle? Somebody remembers that. We have any Muhammad Ali, George Foreman fans on the broadcast tonight? Well, he was the referee. So just imagine, he played for the Harlem Globetrotters, and he is in the Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield, Massachusetts, the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. And he was a boxing referee. So I'm going to write the Boxing Hall of Fame there in New York and see what the possibilities of getting him in the Boxing Hall of Fame, too, as a famous referee. But yeah, that's Zach Clayton. And that's pretty good. That's a pretty good rep to go to Africa to referee a big time fight like that for a kid from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Zach Clayton. All right. So let's go to another one. January 2nd, 1947. And we have a few people joining, and somebody says, I've got a couple of people from Minnesota. Well, thank you, guys. Minnesota's representing tonight. So, and we just got different people coming here. Twin Cities. Man, you know what? Lots of good information. I was thinking about, I went down to Independence, Kansas, And no, it was Fort Scott, Kansas. I've been all over Kansas, but it was Fort Scott, Kansas, and they have the Gordon Parks Museum. And of course, in there, there's a flyer where Gordon had played basketball for the Sioux City Ghost. And the Sioux City Ghosts were represented, and the owner was Harry Crump from the Twin Cities, who operated the Colored House of David. He operated the Van Dyke baseball team. And if you remember, there was a Colored House of David. And I remember talking to Maurice Doolittle Young, who played for both the House of David, the Colored House of David, and the Van Dykes. And he always told me that a lot of the guys couldn't grow a really good beard, like the original House of David out of Benton Harbor, Michigan. So they decided next year, since they could grow a Van Dyke, to change the name of the team to the Van Dykes. And that's how all that came about. But yeah, Harry Crump from the Twin Cities, he ran a hotel, and he was instrumental in getting Marceline and Tony Stone into professional baseball. But he also operated a basketball team. So that's information I haven't had a chance to really talk about much, but that took place in the Twin Cities. So, all right, so always glad to see you guys. All right, okay, so we're gonna go to January 2nd, 1947. Jackie Robinson, you know his name. He is proclaimed the batting champion of the International League. And Jackie batted .349 and hammered International League pitching for 205 hits, 25 doubles, 8 triples, and 3 home runs. And you know Jackie Robinson's story moving forward. One of the America's all-time greatest all-around athletes. Yeah, Jackie Robinson. All right, we're going to keep it going. November 2nd, 1951. Let's see what we have here. We're going to spread that a little bit. In a game played in Chicago, the Minneapolis Lakers and the National Basketball Association defeated the Harlem Globetrotters by an 84-60 score. And George Mikan scored 25 points for Minneapolis. And the game was played as an exhibition in a doubleheader. Is the second game, of course, at Chicago Stadium, and a crowd of 20,000 people showed up to see this game. And the New York Knicks defeated the Milwaukee Hawks by an 89-67 score in the first game. Of course, Goose Tatum, who was a member of the Harlem Globetrotters at that time, what we don't know, we know he was with the Globetrotters at that time, but what I don't know from that game is how many points he scored. And if you ever follow the Globetrotters real closely, what you'll find out is Abe Saperstein was never really into printing the statistics of his players. He was more into things like presenting where they're going to play, how many games they have won. Also, he would, what else would he do? Let's see, I'm going to say one more thing. He always talked about who was on his roster, but he never really gave you statistics from game to game. So as a result of that, Reese Goose Tatum, who's in the Hall of Fame at Cooperstown, Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame, we have no idea how many points this guy scored, because that's not something that Abe Saperstein was really concerned about. But he would certainly give you the attendance and where they were going to play next, but never deeply are we able to find the individual statistics for these ball players. All right. Hey, if you're joining me, feel free to go ahead and say where you're joining me from. I had a couple of people from Minneapolis here a moment ago, and it looks like we've got a couple of Globetrotters game and one of in Minneapolis. And I know you heard of George Mikan. What's interesting is they play the game, they tell how many points George Mikan hit, but nobody on the Globetrotters. They have no idea who did well that night against these NBA teams, right? Okay, and so we're going to go to January 2nd, 1952. Of course, I just left the basketball game. That was January 2nd, 1952. Here we go. So this is January 2nd, 1954. And the Dallas Eagles traded James Clarkston, a.k.a. Buzz Clarkson, a former Wilberforce University student, a Negro Leaguer, and who would eventually advance to the Chicago Cubs of the National League. Played a few games for them. Of course, he played his college baseball under Coach Gaston F. Lewis. And Lewis had played professional baseball with the Bacharach Giants and also the Dayton Marcos as a pitcher. So now Clarkston was a fantastic player that many people may not know about. And I always talk about all of these Negro Leaguers that are not getting attention. And once again, we know some of the prominent names that are repeated often, but there are many people that we're not talking about. And Clarkston would probably fit into that designation. So, but how about this? In 1952, he slammed 42 Texas League home runs, right? And in his minor league career, uh, he hit 189 home runs. I think I had that somewhere in here. He hit 189. Yep, 189 home runs in his minor league career. And once again, that's not bad for a kid who grew up in Jeanette, Pennsylvania. All right. So that's Buster Clarkson, aka Buzz Clarkston. All right. So I have one more. Then I'm going to be out here. I'm looking good right now. Oh, we're about 16 minutes. I've covered a lot of territory. How about this one? January 2nd, 2019. Boy, we're bringing it right up to the day. So we've almost covered 100 years. Porter L. Reed passed away in Muskogee, Oklahoma. And I can tell you lots of stories about Porter Reed. When I post this today, I'm going to post a picture of Porter Reed talking to me. I was there speaking at the depot. Depot is like a old train depot museum in Muskogee. And I remember I always tried to be aware of my surroundings because I was always traveling, and sometimes I'd be by myself. I'm bringing things out of the car. So I remember I pulled up in the parking lot of the museum. I arrived there early, pulled up, and I am getting some things out of my car. Now, when I pulled up, I saw no one. And so I'm opening up my trunk. I'm getting a few things. This is all within a matter of just a few minutes. And all of a sudden, somebody behind me say, "Hey, how you doing?" I turn around and it's Porter Reed. Now this guy's 90, about 90 years old. And I'm saying to myself, how did this 90-year-old guy sneak up on me? I didn't see anybody here. And I told myself, I said, you must not be paying as close attention as you think you ought to be about your surroundings. And Porter Moss pretty much woke me up that I need to take a little more time and look around because, sometimes when you're out here traveling, yeah, I've traveled for many years and I've traveled in small towns and large towns. And these days, I have to be a little more careful. First of all, I'm older. And when I was young, maybe I could run or something like, who knows. But I didn't have some of the awareness that I have now. So it was nothing for me in the 1980s to go to the south side of Chicago and go do interviews with people. I remember sitting when WWII Ratcliffe, he lived in the kind of like a housing project area in Chicago. We go out there, sit on the car and just talk. And it get dark. We're still out there, people walking by and people knew him and things like that. And I thought nothing of it. Now, I probably wouldn't want to go in that same neighborhood and sit on the car and have an interview today. But, I was young then and I would go, and Jimmy Crutchfield lived down on Cottage Grove. I'd go over to his place. One time I went over to visit Maurice Palmer Wiggins, and he was part of the Chicago Old Pros. And actually, I visited him on several occasions. I remember one time specifically, I went to his house. I had rented a car, and we didn't have all this technology now that lets you know that you left your keys in the car. And believe it or not, I left my keys in the car and locked the door. And so when I came back, I didn't have my keys there in the car, and I had to call some a AAA or something like that to come open up the door. They just came with one of those little sticks, stuck it in there, and popped the lock, and I drove off. But yeah, so I'm right in the heart of Chicago. I remember coming to one of the Chicago Old Pros meetings, and they used to have their meetings at the funeral parlor. And I remember coming there for the meeting. I have to look at my notes because I kept journals, and I have to see exactly where it was. But my wife, who was my girlfriend then, she went with me. And so while we were sitting in the meeting, she decided she'd get up and kind of walk around. So she walked around. She came back. Hey, there's a body back there. I mean, hey, what do you expect? We're having a meeting in a funeral home, and this is all the things that I've experienced through the years. Maybe you've never been to a baseball meeting in a funeral home with actual bodies there, but yeah, I did on Chicago's South Side. Yeah, so just great memories from just recording this history and all the people I've met. One of the in Chicago was Subby Bias. Used to go by and talk to Subby Bias and Greg. Let's see, what's his name? McGinnis. He lived across the street from my wife's grandmother. So, but it was always lots of good ball players to interview in and around Chicago. But Porter Reed, and Porter Reed came from Muskogee, Oklahoma, and played with the Chicago American Giants. But there were a number of people who came from Muskogee, and I talk about them all the time because there was a guy named Henry Williams who was responsible for getting a lot of those players there. One guy that we need to talk about, because every time I interview somebody who had played, and there were a number of people that I interviewed going back to the early 80s, they would always talk about this guy named Lafayette Dumas. And he was a great football player at the Manual Training School, and that was the black school there. And New Joseph grew up across the street from the school. Him and his brother Wilson Joseph. I did interview Newt's sister, so I know that to be a true fact. And but yeah, they were all from Muskogee. And one of the guys that I didn't get a chance to talk about too much, Dumas is one that I don't talk about very much. But Wilson Reedus. Wilson Reedus also came through Muskogee and was elevated from Muskogee to the St. Louis Stars. And yeah, through Henry Williams. And Henry Williams had played with St. Louis in the Negro Leagues and also played with the Kansas City Monarchs as well. But he was a catcher. And so, yeah, interesting thing about Wilson Reedus relocated to Fort Worth, Texas. And when I was talking to different people, especially around Chicago, because evidently he kept in contact with him, and I think it was Jack Marshall. I'm not exactly sure now who told me the story, but Wilson Reedus had gone to a funeral, and he was coming back in the funeral limousine, and they had a head-on collision, and he died coming back from a funeral in the funeral limousine. How about that? Ironic. Yeah, that was Wilson Reedus. So yeah, so anyway, these were just a few guys from Oklahoma, and it was a pleasure to meet Porter Reed. Interesting guy, and we talked on the phone. He always liked to talk to me, and I always liked to talk to him. Porter Reed. Yeah, I'm missing some of these guys that had the opportunity to meet and know. And so I just want to share some of these stories with you guys, because you never had a chance to meet some of these people. And this information I'm giving you is not information that's readily available. Sometimes I come online and I don't know what I'm going to say, and my mind starts reflecting back to little stories that I remember. So I will tell you this, guys, if you ever see me in an edition of Antique Roadshows. I'm in an edition of Antique Roadshows. I'm not featuring any baseball. I actually had a movie a movie poster from an African American movie from the 1940s, and that's what they featured me on. So every once in a while, people will recognize me because I'm wearing a baseball cap, and people will say, "Hey, I think I saw you on TV tonight. Was that you?" Yeah, but I'm not talking about baseball. But that was filmed in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so I live in Kansas City, so my wife and I went to Tulsa, and that was filmed in Tulsa. And originally, she was the one who was supposed to be online, but it had rained that morning, and she didn't like how her hair looked. And so she said, well, you go ahead and go online. I don't know if she regrets it or not, because that particular segment has been played, I know, at least 15 times. And people are always running up to me and say, I think I saw you on Antique Roadshow, and indeed it was me. So guys, thank you for joining me. We just finished another edition of This Day in Black Baseball History. This is the January 2nd, 2026 edition, and we're going to have fun this year, and I'm going to start doing some videos and some things like that, and feel free to just join me. So I'm trying to think if Nobody else said where they're from, so we did get some people from the Twin Cities, and that's good enough. So if you join me in the rebroadcast, be sure and subscribe. The network is growing. Thank you. You have a nice evening.